Good evening. Welcome. I am Aja Holmes, and I am a member of the Committee on Lectures and also a PhD student in the Educational Leadership Policy Studies Department. And before we begin, we want to thank our co-sponsors, which is the African American Studies Program, Black Graduate Student Association, the Black Student Alliance, Carver Academy, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, English Department, IOTA Women's Studies Honorary, LAS Miller Lecture Fund, MFA Program in Creative Writing and Environment, Margaret Sloss Women's Center, Sister Circle, Women's Studies Program, the YWCA Ames ISU, and the Committee on Lectures, which is also funded by the government and student body. We'd also like to encourage you to stay after for a book signing and also reception for Nikki Giovanni. Nikki Giovanni is one of America's most distinguished and widely read African-American poets, authors, and essayists. Her outspokenness has spanned a quarter of a century, and human rights activism remains as determined and committed as ever to fighting for civil rights and equality in education. All but one of Giovanni's 20 books remain in print. They include Black Feeling, Black Talk, Black Judgment, and the 2003 release of the collected poems of Nikki Giovanni from 1968 to 1998, and the Prozac Soul of Nikki Giovanni. Nikki Giovanni is a University Distinguished Professor at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia, and an author of some of 30 books for both authors and also children. She is also a lung cancer survivor and a contributor to the book Breaking the Silence, Inspirational Stories of Black Cancer Survivors. If we can all put together and give a hand for Nikki Giovanni.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be back in Iowa. I think Dr. Miller just reminded me it's been like 30 years. It couldn't have been 30 years, could it? I'm not that old. Actually, I am. And my friend Pat Lee is here. And did you know that, by the way, your father built our home? Her father was the big construction guru. Pat's probably rich. She hadn't told you all that. And see, now you know. But, yeah, I didn't know if you knew that, but Tom built our home. And you probably did. Yeah, you probably sit around there, yeah, I built her home. But so I am glad to be back in Iowa. It was hard getting here. I don't want to start a lecture like this because I'm a nice person. And I am. You all don't know that, but I am. And, you know, you try to get over things, but I really hate flying. And I really hate Delta. And I do. We need a bullet train. What the hell is wrong with people? We're having an energy crisis. You're right here, what are you, just a little more than a couple of hours from Chicago. We should have a bullet train from Chicago to Des Moines, you know. We should. You sit there, have a last glass of wine, look at the cows, and, you know, boom, you're there. And then I would take that same train from Chicago, of course, stop in Indianapolis, Cincinnati, and come all the way down here, and it would stop in Roanoke, and I would be home. Same nice, I'd get mountains going home. I just thought I'd mention that because I'm really so sick of everybody. And then I realized, Nikki, are you just in a bad mood because things annoy you, or are you trying? No, this morning a girl at TSA said to me, Miss Giovanni, may I shake your hand? I said, no. I did. And I tried, but you know, it's like, what the hell? I wouldn't even be speaking to you if you didn't have a right to look in my luggage, right? Not to mention patting me and 6-year-old girls down. What kind of sense does that make? Oh, we're scared of 6-year-old girls. They may have a bomb up their ass. What the hell is that? It made you say, did you say little 6-year-old girl? That's pedophilia. When you're telling some 6-year-old girl, now I want to take the back of my hand for a sensitive area. No, bitch, 6-year-old girls don't have sensitive areas. What is, no, I just thought I'd mention that. And if you don't have any 6-year-old girls and you do and somebody touches her there, you will know that she doesn't have a sensitive area. And TSA says, well, I don't think they were following all of the guidelines. There can't be guidelines on 6-year-old. If 6-year-old girls are going to blow up planes, they should be blown up. That's the truth. We need to stop that. When did Americans get to be scared? I am here in the Midwest. I'm a Midwestern by rearing. I'm a Tennessean by birth. I'm a Midwestern by rearing. I grew up in Ohio. When did Americans get so scared of their own damn shadow that we have to take diapers off of babies so that their parents can fly on a plane? It's cowardly. It's cowardly. And I'm really so tired of this president. And so I'm really hoping that Iowa sends a message back. Because Barack, we didn't hire a clerk to pass a bill. We hired a man to bring a vision of something different in America, and we haven't had anything different. You people here are struggling with your bills, struggling with if you got a job, thank God, because it'd be something crazy as TSA that you look in people's luggage and you're proud of that. Oh, today I looked in luggage. That's not making sense, and I just thought I should mention that because I'm a poet. I did. No, it makes me mad. No, I'm tired of the president because I'm tired of hearing excuses about why I inherited a mess. No, baby, you didn't inherit it. You ran for it. You asked us to vote for you because you were going to challenge the mess. We haven't had any challenges. We haven't had anything but caving into Wall Street. And I'm not against Wall Street particularly. But it's called investment capital. Is it me? I went to colored schools. Maybe that's what the problem is. It's called investment capital. So you say, I have money, but Nikki, you're going to start the restaurant, Nikki's Restaurant. I'm going to invest money. And if I get lucky and you make that money, I'll get my money back. But the Wall Street said, no. When I put my money in Nikki's Restaurant, the only way Nikki can make money is not actually serve the people who come in their food. So when you come in, I'm going to say, baby, I'm sorry, I can't serve you food, but I'm going to charge you for it so that I can pay my backers back. Am I right? You don't have to agree, but I'm right. Since when? No, you're intelligent. Since when does venture capital take place over human beings? Since when? Since when do some of you, God bless you, who have decided you're going to be school teachers? So that's another way of saying you're going to turn tricks on Saturday night because you ain't going to make no money teaching school. Well, maybe not turn tricks. Since when does the country tell school teachers we can't pay you? Since when do people who teach in college, we have to hear it, and I don't mind, it's not that, it's not personal, that we don't get raises, we can't afford raises, but people who have run businesses into the ground can give themselves million-dollar bonuses, and somebody's going to tell you, the president says, well, they had a contract. No, wasn't there a contract with us? Didn't we, the citizens, say, we are going to come together so that we can have clean air, so that we can have fresh water, so that we can find a way to grow a few vegetables, so that we can feed our families, so that we can actually have a job, so that we can spend some money, so that somebody else can make some money? That's the way that one goes. Barack Obama has a jobs program that's called WAR, because that's all we've been doing. We've been sending boys and girls off to die. That's the jobs program. Join the National Guard, and you get to kill an Arab. Oh, okay, that sounds like fun. What kind of sense does that make? I thought we hired that boy because he said he needed to stop this war. I thought we hired him because he said Guantanamo is a bad idea. We're not going to have people tortured in our names. We can't even get that done. You and I have a lot of thinking to do, because one of the other things that's going to happen to everybody in this room that's colored is going to say, isn't that nice, we got a colored president? What makes him colored? But the color of his skin. That's not, there's more to being black than meets the eye. Skin color won't get it. And I don't see how him sitting at the table makes me a diner. There's something wrong. And of course the liberals say, I don't want to say nothing because I don't want them to think I'm racist. You don't have to be racist to say the president has not done his job. Now, will the Republicans do their job? Do we really want Donald Trump? I don't think so. But I don't think that these are good choices. And I think that there's something wrong if I have to have a choice between what? Brockman and Obama? When did that become a choice? Or that other bitch, Sarah Palin? When did that become? That's the nicest thing I could say about him. But the thing that's so nice about being a poet is that y'all don't have to vote for me. It just makes me mad. Because at some point, we had hope. At some point, we thought we were going to make a difference. At some point, we thought that this country was going to live up to its promise. And right now, that's been snatched. I'm probably one of the oldest people in this room. I grew up, of course, with a man named Martin Luther King Jr. He did not fight a fight to win. He fought a fight because he knew that a change had to come through raising his voice. Martin wasn't running for president. He wasn't trying to be your senator. He wasn't trying to make any money. He was trying to articulate the right thing. That's all he had was his voice. And somebody took that with a bullet in Memphis. But he raised that voice for that which is right. What happened to this country between then and now that we're all just little sheep, just running around, and anything anybody says to us, it works. Anything anybody says, okay. It's not okay. We're better people than we are being represented to be. And if we who are in the intelligent community, who are supposed to be in the critical community, who can think, and certainly we in the art community, by what right? And I'm mad at the Republicans, so all the Republicans in the room either, I'm sorry, I'm not trying, it's not personal, I don't know who you are, so don't tell me. No, but I'm sick of the Republicans acting like every time we do art, there's something wrong with doing art. Like, we're going to take the art dollar away. Our kids are growing up, they don't know what a crayon is. We were talking at dinner about Harold with the purple crayon. Our kids don't know crayons. Our kids don't know colored paper that they cut out and glue together. Our kids don't know imagination. They don't have gym. They don't have plays. How are we going to be a number one nation when we are sucking the imagination out of the people who are coming behind us? How's that going to happen? And then we're saying everything is going abroad. Why is everything going abroad when we should have, and we do have creative people here, except that we beat it out of them by the time they're about 10 years old. Our kids don't want to read, don't want to write, don't like math. By what right does any black child not love math? We invented the zero. If you don't do anything else for your children, for those of you who have them or your grandchildren, tell them that. We invented the zero. Where would math be without the zero? You ever try to do Roman numerals? You know where we'd be? We can't even figure out what the damn Super Bowl is. Can you imagine? You're trying to do physics. Oh, X, Y. The zero is incredibly important. Why is it that black youngsters are not leading in mathematics? Where are our young scientists? You put something in there, you put a drop in and it does something. It blows up. It does whatever it does. Where's the science? Where's the little frog that we cut up? I know the frog doesn't like it, but how are we going to learn something if we don't do? Well, we eat them. You may as well learn something else from them. I just thought I'd mention that. I wanted to do this book because I knew I was coming to Iowa, and you have such a great history. I mean, when you look at Iowa, Kansas, and Missouri, this whole area is just incredibly important. And I think sometimes the Midwest is right there with, I think that the state of the 50 of us, I think the state that gets screwed most often is West Virginia. And don't you think so? Yeah. Because everybody's always mad at West Virginia, but they don't want to say that they're mad at West Virginia. What they want to say is that those are just hicks and hillbillies and they don't know what's going on. The reason we don't like West Virginia is that West Virginia sent a clear statement. They said they became West Virginia. They should have been Kanawha. They should have kept the name of the river, but they got fooled into being West Virginia. But the reason that they are West Virginia is that they said, we will not send our sons to die so that the Shenandoah can have slaves. We are facing the 150th year of the anniversary, I suppose is the term, of the Civil War, which if you read books, you would think the Civil War was about something called states' rights. And then your next question had to be, states' rights to do what? States' rights to own slaves. America needs to own up to it. They need to be mature about it because nobody in this room owns a slave. Nobody. And if your parents did, good for them because that would be extraordinary. And if your great-grandparents did, you're probably rich and not sitting in this room. But the reality is, that's true. The reality is the Civil War was fought about slavery. It was fought about slavery and the expansion of slavery. If the South had said, okay, listen, we're just going to be what we are, and we're going to stop here. We're not going to move into Kansas. We're not going to move into Missouri. We're not going to move into Nebraska. We'll be okay. We're happy just to have this. We probably would, you and I, people look like us, would still be enslaved, running to the north, and everybody else would be happy. But the South said, no, look at that land. And if we can expand, we can, in fact, be rich. We can live off of other people's labor, off of the soul. I mean, it's a vampire. It really is a situation. We're living off of the blood of somebody else. But there were white people, which you know, who, as they were coming west, had their own dreams. And the white people that had dreams did not dream that one day they could grow up to be an overseer of slaves. They wanted to grow up to be free white men and women. They wanted to grow up to have their own land, to put some crops into the ground, to be responsible for themselves. They did not want to live off of the blood of other people, and this is an honorable thing. And they said, no, when we get into Missouri, we're not going to do that. And the other people said, well, let's have a compromise. They said, well, when we get into Kansas, we're not going to do that. And the slavers went into Kansas, and they slaughtered the abolitionists. And a man named John Brown, who had come to help the abolitionists in Kansas, got there too late. And he was furious when he saw the slaughter of these good men and women who only wanted to be free people on a free land. And he went and he killed the slavers. And everybody got mad at John Brown. And John was sitting there and he said, now what we have to do, literally, on to Virginia. We're going to go over to Harper's Ferry. And what we're going to do in Harper's Ferry is that we are actually going to collect weapons. And we're going to empower the slaves, and the slaves are going to rise up. But you and I know, because we're watching something else, and this is not Nikki's lecture, just want to share a few things. We know that the peasants don't start revolutions, the middle class does, which is one reason there is a great war right now on the middle class in America. Because if we can eliminate the middle class, we can eliminate dissent. Because people who are hungry and scared and cold are not going to dissent. It's only you and I who are trying to send our children to college who are saying, well, that ain't right. And we know that. We know that John Brown at Harper's Ferry, which was at that point in Virginia, started a war. So when we look at it, if we say, when did the Civil War start? Fort Sumter was the least of it. It actually started in Kansas when the slavers came in and killed the abolitionists, and John Brown is going to respond. We know that John was not successful. We know that he was lynched. But we know that every slave in the world knew what had happened. And they made a song, John Brown's Body. We know that Stephen Vincent Benet took that up as another cause. We know that the people recognize the change is going to come. I wrote a book because I was invited to write a book, and they don't invite me often to do things, so I always accept it with a good spirit. I knew they didn't know what they were getting into. Some people do, some people don't. But my editor, Laura Godwin, because it was the anniversary of Lincoln, called me, and I don't know if any of you here are interested in writing children's literature. It's a closed shop. I can literally tell you, if nobody calls you and asks you to do it, it won't get done. But Laura Godwin, who's vice president of Henry Holt, we had done a book on Rosa Parks, and we had terrific success with that, and I was really glad because I love Miss Parks. She was a friend. And Laura said to me, Nikki, you know, we were thinking, why don't you do a book on Lincoln? And I said no. And I said no, not because I couldn't, but because Lincoln is the most written about president in the United States. What do I, a poet, have to add? And I said, no, Laura, I don't think, there's anything I can do about Lincoln. And she said, well, what about? And we were just talking back and forth and back and forth. And I said, Laura, the only thing I know about Lincoln that I might be able to add is his friendship with Frederick Douglass. And Laura said, what friendship with Frederick Douglass? Good. He had a friendship with Frederick Douglass. I knew that Lincoln had invited Frederick Douglass to one of the inaugurals. I didn't remember which, but I live in Roanoke. I live actually in Blacksburg, Virginia, but we're 4 hours from D.C. So I said, well, I'll go over to the Smithsonian, which is a great institution that deserves all of the support that it can get from our tax dollars. And I said, I'll drive over to the Smithsonian because they have things like this. You can see who was invited to what. They have all of it. And it's just a question of looking it up, and I did. So I realized I had it. I actually entitled this book, Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln, An American Friendship. And you can see the problem is that nobody knows Frederick Douglass, so the book's going to get buried. So Laura called me. She said, do you mind if we change the title? I said, to what? She said, Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. I'm reasonable. I said, okay. It worked for me. What I wanted to show, and the men were friends. And to say that the men were friends, we're talking the 1860s, so that's not going to be that they hung out and had a beer. We lived in a segregated society. But we all know, we who are white and we who are black in this room, we all know that there are friendships that have developed whether you have a beer or you don't have a beer. There are things that you do that you feel comfortable with people. We wanted to open the book because everybody thinks they know what it is, but they don't, with the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, if you're a militant black person, you say, when you read the Emancipation Proclamation, all you see is that he freed the slaves where they couldn't be freed. But that didn't matter because he freed the slaves. It didn't matter if they could be or not. After I looked up who was invited, and that was going to be important, the next thing that I'm doing here, for those of you who ever write children's books, you always have to know the weather. If this book was being written in the 1960s about Jack Kennedy, about John Kennedy, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, we would have snow. Because those of us who are my age who remember President Kennedy, it snowed cats and damn dogs in D.C. That's when the National Guard was not fighting wars, but actually helping at home when they were needed. And so the National Guard came and dug Washington, D.C. out. Some of you are too young to know that, but you can look it up. If we had had the National Guard at home instead of fighting a war, when Katrina hit New Orleans, we would have had people to be able to go down and help get those people out and keep them alive. If we had a National Guard, instead of them fighting wars, right now, we would have them in Texas putting fires out. But we don't have anybody to help with those things because we are cowardly at war with people that we don't want to declare the war, and we don't want to start a draft, and we don't want to have a war tax. And I think that's despicable, but we have a pretty night here. It was a lovely night. The stars were out. And you can look these things up, but it's always so much fun when you start to do the weather things. I'm a big fan of the weather because I say that to kids all the time. I say that I teach at Virginia Tech, and I say that to my students all the time. You have to know the weather because if you know the weather, you'll know where the seeds go. And as the seeds go, so goes civilization. For those of us, for example, who would be Christian in this room, we know that Joseph and his brothers all had to go down into Egypt. It wasn't because they had pretty pyramids and interesting pharaohs. It was because they were the breadbasket of the world. And that's where you went for the grains. And that's why people like Joseph and them could prophesy. You know, there'll be the fatted cow and the skinny cows. So you knew the drought was going to come and the cows were going to eat it up, things like that. For those who use the Bible, also use your head and think about the weather. Lincoln is walking around with his wife, Mary Todd. Now, we know Mary Todd was not a nice person. And so Laura said to me, because I'm going to have a line in here, and President Lincoln is looking, and he's being distracted. And Mary Todd is saying to him, you know, Abraham, what are you looking for? He said, I'm looking for my friend Frederick Douglass. He's coming to the inauguration. And Mary Todd Lincoln goes, oh, Abraham, you know you shouldn't invite a Negro to the White House because she was a Southern sympathizer. And Lincoln is going to look at her, and I'm going to say it because I'm being nice, more in pity than in sadness, right? Laura said to me, Nikki, you know, I don't know if that was fair to say that Mary Todd Lincoln said that. I said, well, Laura, I didn't put it in her mouth. She said it. But it was fair because she was a bigot. And I didn't make her a bigot. I don't know, her mother and father made her a bigot, her preacher, I don't know who made her a bigot. But I didn't. I just pointed out that she was. And she was. And, well, Lincoln is going to start to cross the room. And I'm going to have him crossing. And, of course, Frederick Douglass is going to be coming from this way. So we're going to see Douglass out in the woods because, as you recall, Douglass ran away several times from his master. He was only successful on the third time. So he's going to be in the forest. Let me tell you why I love Brian. I don't know if all of you can see this. But when you do an illustrated children's book, one of the things that should happen is that the story should be able to be told as much without the words as without the pictures. This is a Quaker barn. Now, a lot of people, we don't have them out here so much because you know the Midwest has different kind of barns. And I loved it that Brian Collier, who was a young man, actually took the time to say what kind of barn would Frederick Douglass run into. So if you're reading this to your children and they say, well, Daddy, what is that? You can say, that's a Quaker barn. And this is where the water comes to grind the mills. And you try to be accurate with these things. Now, of course, Frederick Douglass is going to run away, and he's going to actually be a part of the Underground Railroad. I don't have any problem with Quakers. I think the Quakers are a great people. Don't misunderstand. But the Quakers did not invent the Underground Railroad. They helped it. And I think that that's important because everybody wants to act like, I remember Strom Thurmond and them, these Northerners come down here and upset our Negroes. No, baby, that's not what happened. Your Negroes are always upset. You just try to find somebody that you could find. Nobody, if slavery was fun, don't you know that all white people be lining up? I want to be a slave. How come I can't be a slave? Slavery is not fun, and the people voted, if you recall, with their feet. So that so many slaves bled out of the South, we're talking 100,000 people or more, that the South insisted upon and had the votes to pass the Fugitive Slave Act. They would not have needed the Fugitive Slave Act if the darkies had been happy. They needed it because they didn't want them to find succor with places like the Quakers. Now, we do know a lot of Quakers lost their property, and we do know that some Quakers lost their lives standing up for what they believed. But I just wanted to point out that the Underground Railroad was a black enterprise that the Quakers joined, and we're really pleased that they did. In the meantime, here in Illinois, or in Illinois, not here, we're going to have Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln is going to be a tall, strong boy, and he's going to work on the farm. His father was not a nice man, as you know, but many of us have fathers like that, so you go on, you get over it. He's going to, of course, want to read. They both are going to be very fond of learning. We know the story, of course, of Abraham Lincoln. I'll pull the book for a second. We know the story of Abraham Lincoln going to the grocery store and getting a nickel too much change. He had walked a couple of miles. You remember that story. And you know that he turned around and went back and gave that nickel back. We all remember that story. That story has more sense than George Washington and the cherry tree. A lot of people don't know, and that's why I'm going to pull the book for a second. A lot of people don't realize what that nickel means. Now, I come, and Pat, from a city called Lincoln Heights. In the Civil War, that's true, in the Civil War, we're going to have Cincinnati, Ohio, as an important hub. The Ohio River is going to be the point that if the enslaved Africans can get here, or at this point they're Americans because they've been born here, then they can be free. They settled in the west end of Cincinnati. I don't have no way to explain any of that to you, just it's the west end. When General Beauregard was beginning to come through Cincinnati, he was in Kentucky, he had what they call spy glasses. He looked over, and he knew that if he could take Cincinnati, he could control the Mississippi River. Had he been able to do that, the Civil War would have been very different. The Union knew that they were in trouble. So the Union did what people do, and I'm not going to, deal with it, just what people do. They went and said to the black men that they had been refusing to allow to help, you have to come and dig out in the river in Cincinnati. And so the black men were happy. They're free, but they wanted other people to be free. They dug out on the front of the river. So when Beauregard looked, what he saw was black men. Now, he's a white man and he's a general. He knows that no other white man would send black men to fight his white men. So he thinks that they are fooling him into thinking that this is a defense and that he'll come over and the white men that he doesn't see will then fight his men and they'll all get killed. You can look this up. So he did not cross the river. We now know, and Cincinnati knows it, it's history, that the black men saved Cincinnati. But we are all in this room old enough to know that people are ungrateful. And so instead of saying thank you or that was really sweet of you or we appreciate it, they did that thing that people do when they get crazy. They decided we can't let those black guys think that they did something, so they started lynching them. And they started burning people in the West End. And blacks recognized we have to leave the West End because these fools are going to kill us if we don't. They then decided to go into what is called the Valley. In the Valley, which is where we grew up, in the Valley, land was a nickel an acre. So the difference between life and death was a nickel. Nobody had a nickel. And so people put their nickels together. And as they did, they opened up these lands. It's not big. Lincoln Heights is not big. But that's a part of what was opened up so that the blacks fleeing the riots in Cincinnati would have a place to come. And they built Lincoln Heights, which is where we grew up. That's a nickel. Douglass always dreamed of going abroad. He always dreamed of freedom. He always dreamed of going abroad. He signed on a ship, and he went to England. Now, as you know, he's free when he goes to England. He's fine. Lincoln is going to go down to New Orleans, and he's going to take some. Now, when you read Lincoln, it depends on who you're reading, you'll see that some people said, when Lincoln went down to New Orleans and he saw slavery and he was horrified. I don't think that that's accurate. Lincoln was always horrified because he was a free white man who knew he could not remain free in an enslaved. We're going to get that expression from him. A nation cannot be half slave and half free, and he's going to be right. So he's going to know this has to stop. Lincoln runs for office, and as you know, the first time he didn't win it, but the second time he did. And we know that Frederick Douglass, coming back from England, and Douglass was drop dead gorgeous. He really was Billy D. Williams gorgeous. No, he really was a beautiful man. And not that Lincoln wasn't had anything to do with that, but Douglass... But Douglass called on any congressman who would see them because he's an abolitionist. He wants slavery abolished. Lincoln did see him. The two men had an incredible amount in common. One, they both had the driest sense of humor. I don't care what you're reading about Lincoln or Douglass. You will see in either one. They had a very dry sense of humor, so they connected on that, and they had a love of food. Now, I was not able to put the food in this book, and I was really sorry because Lincoln loved good food, and so did Douglass. And I really had them at one point at a restaurant over on Southeast, and it got complicated. It's like, you've complicated the story, Nikki. And I said, oh, I don't want to complicate the story. But I had them eating on Southeast and talking about Mammy Pleasant and John Brown. So Douglass calls on Abraham Lincoln as a congressman, and they talk. We know that war is coming. And we know that Stephen Douglass, we know this. I love this. This is my favorite illustration in the book because we have a young slave peeping through the flag asking, is there no place for me? At this point, America, though we have a ways to go, is going to say yes. There's going to be a spot for you. We're going to have now, of course, John Brown. And I did have Lincoln and Douglass discussing John Brown because John Brown was a friend of Frederick Douglass. When he left the slaughter, when he left there before he went to Harper's Ferry, John Brown stopped and visited with Frederick Douglass. And he tried to convince Frederick Douglass to join him. Frederick Douglass thought that this would not work, and he tried to say that to John Brown. But Douglass knew everybody. And so one of the things that Douglass did was to get in touch with his friend, and she's an incredibly important person in the Civil War who has pretty much been forgotten. Her name is Mammy Pleasant, Mary Ellen Pleasant. Mary Ellen had moved, she too had run away from slavery and had moved out to San Francisco. And she had money. She had started, people try to make Mammy Pleasant what they've tried to do to Mary Magdalene. They try to make a whore out of her, which is not true. She went to San Francisco, and whatever else you know about the gold rush, about the 49ers, about any of that, you know that the only people that made money were the people that were doing something. Levi Strauss made a fortune because he made pants. Hearst made a fortune because he did the newspapers. The people that were mining for gold didn't make anything because they'd come back with their gold and they'd sell it. We're going to have Mammy Pleasant because she cleaned clothes. And she went from cleaning clothes, she did that thing that people who wash all day, my grandmother did that. My grandmother, with whom I lived, washed on Mondays. And what she would do is get up and put a soup or a stew on, usually 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. And then we would wash. Grandmother ultimately, thank God, got a washing machine and ultimately a dryer. But during the era that I was a little girl living with her, she did the washing. And so Mammy Pleasant did the same thing. Mary Ellen got up in the morning and put her dinner on, which I'm sure she had learned from her days of being enslaved. And then she would wash the white people's clothes, and she would iron them, and it would be ready. But when people came to pick up their clothes, they're smelling the stew or the soup that she's making. And they're saying to her, because they call her Mammy, and you all know enough about white and black people to know why that happened. And they're saying things like, Mammy, why don't you sell me a bowl of that soup? And she was definitely not going to give it, so she started to sell it, right? And then with those nickels and dimes that she made, she made friends because she was very closed-mouthed. Like a lot of black women I know who are a little bit older than I am, she had nothing, nothing's going to pass her lips that she doesn't intend. And so she got to know the politicians because she's cleaning their clothes. And they're trying to help her because they liked her. And they'd say things like, Mammy, Nob Hill is going to open up. Why don't you buy a house up there? Why don't you buy a house here? So she ended up with houses. And she used to rent those rooms out. And so she was making money. You can look up Mary Ellen Pleasant in the history of San Francisco because Mary Ellen fought the cable cars for segregation, the same thing, the Plessy versus Ferguson, is going to be Mary Ellen Pleasant. And she won. So San Francisco never had segregated public transportation because of Mary Ellen Pleasant. You might not know that, some you can look up. Mary Ellen not only decided to send John Brown money, she decided that she wanted to help. So she decided that she was going to come. She was going to fight for freedom because, like a lot of people, she hated slavery. She's coming east. And she gets to Yellow Springs, Ohio. We all know where Yellow. And when she gets to Yellow Springs, she hears someone passes the word. The grapevine is an incredible thing. All is lost. And so she turns back. And thank God she did, because she became a force in San Francisco. But you get to meet Mary Ellen. Now, what happened with Mary Ellen is that everybody said, I don't think Mary Ellen is important. And it's one of those things when you write a book, you say, I agree, because I'm easy to get along with. Said, you're right. Mary Ellen's not important. If the book is called Lincoln and Douglas by Laura. If it's called Lincoln and Douglas by Nikki, Mary Ellen stays. Because you've got to learn something. This woman stood up for a lot. Now, we're going to do a thing here called foreshadowing, because we all know that Lincoln is going to die. The war is going to be over, and we're going to know that what's his name, John Wilkes Booth, is going to shoot him. So going to shoot him. So we see him in the dark here. And he's not going to be with us long. And that's sad. And so he went to see our American cousin, and he's going to get shot. But we're going to have one thing, and I wanted that. When they finally cross back to each other, let me see if I passed the gate here. I did. I'm sorry. We needed to see the Civil War. Brian does these things with gates, and they let him get away with it because they love him. So it's extra pages. And so we see the Civil War, which was very sad. Some 625,000 people died. More people died in the Civil War than any others. And so nobody ever wants to see anything like that again. But I'm having the two men finally cross the room to each other. And Abraham Lincoln goes over and says to Frederick Douglass, Fred, he called him Fred, I thought I saw you earlier. And, of course, Douglass refers to him as Mr. President. And it's like, well, Mr. President, you did, but there was some mistake about which door my wife and I were to enter. Because when Douglass showed himself and he said, I'm Frederick Douglass, and this is Mrs. Douglass, they said, go around to the back. And he said, no, I don't go around to the back. The president invited me. And so there was a fight about that. And they were talking, and it was kind of fun because they were glad to see each other. And he said, now that this great war is over, what a journey we've had. And he said, yes. And Lincoln says, well, what do you think is going to happen next? And I gave the words to Douglass because I'm black. And the words were, well, sir, with charity toward, with malice toward none and charity for all, we will knit the nation back together. And I think we have the right person to do that. And Lincoln said, well, I hope so. And so, of course, we're also going to give a timeline to show what has happened. So I just thought I would share that. Thank you. But I just want to mention one thing briefly. Thank you. I really like the book. And let me do one other thing, then I'll leave you alone with this. On Lincoln's 50th anniversary, speaking of mistakes, I got invited to be at the Lincoln Center. And I made CNN. It's like, oh, boy, Mommy was dead, but she would have been happy. And I said to a friend of mine, because the Lincoln Society invited me, and I said, well, I have a fur. I said, I'm going to wear my fur. And my friend Jenny said, I don't think it's going to be, you won't need the fur. I said, I wouldn't care if it was August. I wouldn't. I'm a black woman. Marian Anderson stood on that place in her fur. And in honor of Marian Anderson, in honor of all of the black women, and out of Rosa Parks and everybody else, I'm wearing my fur and I'm standing there. I wrote a poem for Lincoln. I thought they would have been happy, to tell you the truth. I didn't understand why they got upset with me. But I didn't. It's a nice poem. It's called The American Vision of Abraham Lincoln at this moment. At this moment, resting in the comfort of the statue of the 16th President of the United States, missing an equally impressive representation of his friend and advisor, Frederick Douglass, we come. On this day, recalling the difficult and divisive war, We are compelled with the prayer in the name of those captured and enslaved, who with heart and mind cleared the wilderness, raised crops, brought forth families, submitted their souls before a merciful and great God, to acknowledge that the Civil War was fought not to free the enslaved, for they knew they were free, but to free the nation from the terrible cancer eating at our hearts. At this moment, in which we are embarrassed by our governor of our fifth largest state, who appoints a man to the United States Senate, to which both he and his minion agree the letter of the law is more important than the spirit. Now, when we are dismayed that the accidental governor of the Empire State can find just one more reason to rain pain and rejection on a family that has offered only grace and graciousness. After 200 years, when we rejoice that another son of the Midwest has offered himself, his wife, and his two precious daughters to show us a better way, we gather in recognition and understanding that today is always and forever today, allowing us to offer this plea for light and truth and goodness, forgiving as we are forgiven, being neither tempted nor tolerant of those who are. We come at this moment to renew and refurbish the American vision of Abraham Lincoln. They just got mad because David Patterson is a corrupt old son of a bitch, and he is, and somebody needed to call that out, and I did. And then they got mad because of Blagojevich, and that was crazy too, you know. But I wrote some love poems. So I want to read some love poems. My mother died 5 years ago, and I think losing your mother is really different from losing, you know, like my father died 28 years ago, something like that. And when Gus died, you know, I had Mommy and my sister. But my sister had developed a lung cancer, and it had metastasized to her liver and to her brain. So my sister was dying, and my mother knew my sister was dying. We all did. And I have a small house, and I had put an addition, I guess you'd call it, like another suite, because I thought, well, Mommy should come and live with me. I got along with my mother. I really loved my mother. And I thought, well, that'd be great because we cooked together, Mommy and I did. And, you know, just the things you do. And I've always enjoyed, you know, everybody doesn't get along with their mother, and I understand that. But I liked mine. I thought, well, you know, I said to Mom, you know, well, we'll come and, you know, see, it's really nice. And it'll be great. And we're all dog people, so the dogs all get along. And it'll work. But I think Mommy just didn't want to bury my sister. And she's my oldest sister. And I don't think that I would bet on it. Mommy just didn't want to do it. And so for no particular reason, Mommy died. She took a fall on June 8th, and she was dead by June 14th. And I just think she just did it to be mean, actually. And I do. I recognize, you know how you have to always, we all in this room, you know, how you always you kind of know where you are in the scheme of things. And I've recognized, and it's fine. I recognize that, you know, I'm not, you know, what you call your primary candidate for heaven. But I know I'm not, because Mommy died in June and my sister died that August. So it was like 6 weeks. I lost both of them. Then my Aunt Ann died that October. And so I know that I'm not, you know what I'm saying, you know, nobody's sitting there saying, you know, bring Nikki up to heaven. But I figure when I die, I'm going to actually go get myself a day pass, because you can get a day pass to anything. And I'm going to go... You can. And I'm going up to heaven. I'm going to let them know. I know what you did. Nobody asked, you know, well, how's Nikki going to be? No, you know what I'm saying? People are always like, you be all right. I'm going to die. And if she was singing a song, I'd go to prepare a place for you. So my sister's like, okay, Mommy's in heaven. I'm going to go join Mommy. And nobody's saying, well, what about Nikki? You know, everybody's like, you be all right. Well, how the hell am I going to be all right when you take everybody away? So I was incredibly sad. You know what I'm saying? And when you do that, you sit on the deck, Alex and I, and you don't actually know Alex, but she's like, she's a Yorkie. And she's really sweet. But Alex and I were sitting on the deck, you know, and we're drinking too much. I mean, you know how you, well, you have to admit that, because you're incredibly sad. And what are you going to do when you're incredibly sad? You drink. And so you do. You sit on the deck and you have your glass of wine, and then you have the next, and you have the next, and then you fall asleep, or I guess some would say pass out, and then you wake up. And I realize, oh, my goodness, you know what I'm saying? This is embarrassing. I can't do this. My mother would be upset if she saw me doing this. And so I said to myself, Nikki, you have to work your way out of this, because I was very close to Mommy, and so it was like, how am I going to do that? Well, I'm supposed to be a writer. If you're a writer, you work your way out of it. What makes you happy? Love poems. So what I started to do was write love poems, because they make you laugh. For one reason or another, I just kind of challenged myself, write a love poem, write a love poem. I started writing love poems, and it does. It makes you smile. Any of you who ever tried it, it's good therapy. And so I'm writing the love poems, and it makes you smile. But then it makes you look at people differently, too. And so all of a sudden, because I never did take time off from work. I still haven't, though they owe me time now. But I couldn't figure out, well, they do, and I will take it, but I want to be happier. You don't want to take time off from work when you're sad, because you'll never go back to work again. When are you not, you're not going to forget you had a mother and that you miss her. You know what I'm saying? So I was just dealing with that. But in going to work, you know how you start writing love poems, so you start looking at people differently, because you're looking for little things that you can write about. And as you notice things, people notice you. And then you're like, oh, isn't he cute? And you're smiling, and he's smiling. Then you're saying to yourself, gosh, I'm in bad shape. And you are, you get to be my age, you're in bad shape. So you think, I need to get in shape. So I started walking. Well, if you start walking and you tone up, the clothes that you used to wear don't fit. So now you need to go and get new clothes. Well, when you get new clothes, you're becoming more stylish, so people are looking at you. You know what I'm saying? And, well, it kind of helps. And so you kind of talk yourself into this wild, crazy love affair, which is really a good idea, because you're not looking to get married or something. You're just looking to... Well, falling in love is a good antidote for anything. And I'm always saying that if you're not in love, you should be. You have to, find somebody. And the best thing to do in falling in love is to not have a preconceived notion of who it should be. So once you get rid of the preconceptions, then all of a sudden the world is open to you. They have to be legal, but other than that. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And it's really good. And you'll also get a dog, because dogs will introduce you to really lovely people, because then you got your dog and they have their dog, and the dog started talking, and then it's like, let's have dinner. Oh, that's a good idea. And things work. I just thought, in case you hadn't thought about that. So I wanted to read a couple of poems from this book, because I love it so much. This is the one. The book is called Bicycles. And it's called Bicycles because love, like bicycles, requires trust and balance. And all of us in this room learned to ride a bike. Some of you, unfortunately, probably learned with something called training wheels. But there are no training wheels from riding a bike, because no matter what you do with the training wheels, one day they go off. And you have to ride the bike. And that's going to require trust and balance. But you know what else is you do? You're going to fall. You're going to be on the bike and you're going to fall. You're going to scratch your knee. You're going to fall. And what you're going to do from that bike is you're going to get up and you're going to ride it again. And it's the same thing with love. Anybody who's been in love said, well, I was in love once and my heart was broken. Oh, get over it. Grow up. Of course your heart was broken. You had one. Get it back and see what you can do with it, because that's what love is all about. If you don't have a broken heart, you haven't risked anything. So I wrote, that's true. I'm a science freak. And, of course, now that it's beginning to be spring, because we have these stupid storms. But one of the things that you're watching is the migrations, and I thought I would read Migrations, because it's a nice poem. When the sun returns to the Arctic Circle from its winter rest, the grasses sprout, seducing the winged and the hoofed. Polar bears and their cubs must flee before the ice breaks up, although others begin a northern journey. The snow goose flies from the Gulf of Mexico to mate and birth her young. 2 million Mongolian gazelles move over the tundra, where each gives birth at the same time, defying the will of the predators who would consume the gazelle's future, though only, of course, to provide nourishment for their own young predators. Let's not judge too harshly. Salmon swim upstream, jumping falls, and grizzly bears. Grasshoppers, ignoring the advice of ants, make music to celebrate winter's end. Monarch butterflies, leaving the safety of Zihuatanejo, forge north, beginning the longest wing journey of spring. With only hope of warmth and the promise of grasses, they unflinchingly face hunger, thirst, predators, winds, rains, uncertainties, as would I for you. It's a nice love poem. I don't know if you guys do Deal or No Deal. It's the most perfect television show. And I always have to admit, I probably spend too much time alone. It is, because it requires nothing. Normally, no, I do that American thing. You all probably do it too. You're eating dinner, and you're there at the table, and the television is there, and you turn the television on, which gives you a false sense that you're actually having dinner with somebody, right? And it works. It's what television does. And I, like most people, I like to eat dinner about 7:30 or so. So I'm sitting down at 7:30. Well, I don't know when you get it here, but it's 7:30 Eastern time. It's a show called Jeopardy. And I'm a writer, and I don't know what you know about writers, but we are an incredibly competitive group. So I'm now sitting down at dinner, and I'm looking at Jeopardy, and I am giving myself an ulcer trying to answer these questions before these people have anything to do with it. It makes you crazy. And so I'm saying to myself, Nikki, you can either eat dinner at 7:30 or watch Jeopardy, but you can't do both because it's making me crazy. So I did the right thing. I said, I'll have a glass of wine at 7:30 and look at Jeopardy, and then I'll eat my dinner at 8. Well, you know what's going to happen at 8 o'clock, because all over the world, dun, 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 law and order. So, yeah, and you're flipping around, and it's law and order. So you're cutting into your steak, and there's this dead woman. It makes you crazy. And you're like, oh, my God. You feel like a cannibal. And so I started hunting down I have, that DirecTV thing. And I started going down, and I finally found the world's most perfect television show, Deal or No Deal. There's nothing to it. There's no luck. There's no intelligence. There's just nothing to deal or no deal. The only trick to it is you can't be greedy. And so you're looking at it, and Deal or No Deal comes up. For those of you who don't know Deal or No Deal, it's kind of like Queen for a Day light. I don't know if you remember Queen for a Day. Do you want to be queen for a day? And it was always this poor woman standing around, I need a refrigerator because the food got rotten last week, and my granddaughter got into it, and she died of, bubonic plague or some shit like that. And so Deal or No Deal is doing the same kind of crazy thing. So speaking of West Virginia, let's take Larry from West Virginia. So Howie is coming on. The girl's coming on. Howie's coming on. And he's saying, Larry, come on down, because there's always a Larry. Now, I don't know why... And forgive me if there's one in the room. I don't know why they don't put clothes on people. But Larry's going to come down. His T-shirt is quite not fit. You know what I mean? It's going to be kind of tight. And Howie is going to say to him, well, Larry, why did you want to be on the show? He said, well, I've been married for, 35 years and never did give my wife a honeymoon. I want to give her a honeymoon. And the grandbaby is getting ready to go to kindergarten. She needs a pair of shoes. So I'm going to give her... love to give her a pair of shoes. Okay. And the dog, my old dog Blue, needs shots. Oh, okay, good. Everybody claps. That's good. But for those who don't play the game, now he has to pick a case. Now, the first thing they tell you on the show is that the case is electronically controlled, as these lights are electronically controlled. This mic is electronic. So it means that anything that's in there is electronically controlled. That's common sense. So Larry's going to say something like, okay, I'm going to take 21 because that's when I lost my virginity. Everybody's like, whoa. And so he takes 21. Everybody claps because the audience is always clapping. And the first thing you have to do is you have to pick 5 numbers. The high numbers are on the left, the low numbers are on the right? And so he has to pick a number. He picks 5 numbers. For whatever reason, because it had nothing to do with him, he didn't pick any of the high numbers. He's going to get a good first offer, let's say $18,000, something like that. And Howie, who's always going to talk very slow to these people, Howie is going to, hello, I'll tell him. This is $18,000, cash money, right? So Howie's trying to tell him something, but he's not listening because he's like, whoa, no, I got $1 million right here. And so instead of just, quietly pushing it down, he's going to like, no way, banker, whop, it's like showing off. And he's now got to pick 5 more numbers. And for whatever reason, he's going to pick 5 more numbers. But on this side, he's going to knock maybe the $50,000 out, which means that his deal will go up. So now let's say he's got like $41,000. Now, however you look at that, that's good money. I'll tell him. $41,000. This is real money. And he's trying to say that's $9,000 off of $50,000. No matter how you cut that, it'd take somebody on a honeymoon, it'll get a dog shot, and he'll get some shoes for the kid. But now he's in a zone because he thinks he's doing something. So he's looking at the banker like, no, I'm not taking that whop. Now, this is what I do for you. If you find yourself on Deal or No Deal, no matter what, you must take the third deal. It is anything after that is going to kill you. So he's going to, it is. So he now has to pick 4 numbers. He's going to pick 4 numbers, but he's going to leave the million and the 3/4 and a $500,000 in. So the deal is going to go up. He's looking at really $57,000, $58,000, right? And so Howie's going to say to him, this is a hard decision. Who did you bring to help you? I got to tell you, folks, do not take your loser cousins to Deal or No Deal. It's not their money. And so he's like, I got my friend, and and they're all standing around like, no, we don't want it. Well, it's not their money. It's your money. Take it and go home and get something for what you did. But he's going to listen. These losers sitting there, they don't even mean him well. They're mad because they're not on the show. No, I taught a kid once to sign a $100 million contract. And I said to him, you realize you don't have any friends. And he said, why is that, Nikki? I said, because none of your friends have $100 million. Everybody that you used to know hates you because they don't have what you have. You must go buy new friends. Do something. But do not hang out with those Negroes you used to be hanging out with, or they're going to bring you down, which they did, but that's another discussion. So now, I just thought I'd mention that. So now we are in that zone. This is the third deal, and he's going to do a foolish thing. He's going to say no. And now what we're going to see with Larry is the next thing he's going to take out is the million. So it's going to go down. And then he's going to he's going to do a thing that gamblers do, but it's not a gamble. The house wins and you lose. He's then going to do it again, and it's going to go down. And it's finally going to come down to him and like Andrea, one of the girls. And it's going to be $100 or $10 in his thing. And because he's a loser, he's going to say, well, I'm going for the case. Well, Larry, it's electronically controlled. If $1 million used to be in it, it's not going to be in it when you open it up. So Larry opens it up, and it's $10, right? And he does that thing to, if I may use this expression, a shit-eating grin. And it's like, but he's been pimped, and he knows it. And he's like, well, I had a good time. No, Larry, you didn't. You did not have a good time. You came with nothing and you left with nothing. That's your fault. Greedy. I was bitching to my class, and I said, why is it that people like me don't get on Deal or No Deal? I could use $50,000, $60,000, And they were like, Nikki, if you got on Deal or No Deal, you'd make a fool of yourself like all the rest of them. If the first time in my life that I made a fool of myself was on Deal or No Deal, I've led a charmed life. But they hurt my feelings. And I thought I would let them know that they had hurt my feelings. So I wrote a poem for my class, Deal or No Deal, for English 4714, CRN 16937, just so they would always know who they are. My class is not so sure that I should apply to Deal or No Deal. They think I am lucky. I am, after all, teaching them. They know I am smart. They are, for example, learning, yet they don't want to see me make those greedy mistakes and push beyond the envelope. The banker is neither friend nor foe. He's a machine. To think you can beat him is to think you will win at Vegas or love. But I persist. My dream is a red dress high above my knees, high-heeled red sandals, and me coming over the top, the music booming, doom doo doo doom 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 doo doo doom doom. Hi, Howie, I will say with a lovely smile. I don't want to play the game. I want to be it. They were born 40 years after me, yet I am younger. I know you cannot go through life unless you are willing for love or money to make a fool of yourself. Where else does the ecstasy lie?
Thank you so much. We have a special presentation by the ladies of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated to our soror, Nikki Giovanni, and then we will have question and answer sessions, and there will be a mic right in the middle of the floor.
become an expert at the crutches. Good evening, everyone. We just want to take a moment here. My name is Nicole Bartolozzi, and I'm the current president of the Ames Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And up here with me this evening is one of our sorors, Aja Holmes and Monet Lane, who is a member of Phi Chapter here at Iowa State. For those of you that don't know, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated is an organization of college-educated women committed to the constructive development of its members into public service with a primary focus on the Black community. We are fortunate enough today to have one of our great members here speaking to you, Ms. Giovanni. So on behalf of the Ames Alumni Chapter and Phi Chapter here at Iowa State University, we want to present you with this small token. You are truly an inspiring woman who gives others the courage to speak up and be bold in a world that sometimes tells us not to. We thank you for using your gift of expression to reach the masses and stand boldly on your beliefs. We appreciate your wit and even more so your wisdom, and we are proud to call you our soror.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So I need to move out of your way. I won't take you out. So be careful.
So you're going to do your Q&A?
Yes, I'm going to take the mic to Noah before.
Oh, okay. There's probably no questions.
It's on. There it is.
Greetings. My question is, how have you used the tragedy of Virginia Tech to channel your creativity in your classroom and in your own professional work?
I have not. It's probably the shortest answer I've ever given. I have not. She asked how have I used the tragedy at Virginia Tech. I have not. I have not written about it. I was invited or asked, I should say, it wasn't even an invitation, by the president to anchor convocation, which happened the day after. And the answer to that is yes. And so when Sandy Smith, who was president's secretary, called me and said, Nikki, we need you to anchor convocation, my answer was where and what time. And we were waiting, as you know, well, you may not, we were waiting for the governor. George Bush was president, and Mr. Bush sent his plane to pick up the governor, Tim Kaine, who had been in China. And so we pushed convocation back to noon because that's as quick as we could get Governor Kaine in. Everybody came, you know, the George was Bush and Laura, everybody. And so my job was to do what I did, literally drive the bus. And so I drove the bus, and as I said, you know, I was able to park it, and as opposed to crashing. I've not written about Virginia Tech. I don't have anything more to say about the tragedy. You know, I started this chat, this conversation with you here at Ames on the Civil War. 150 years later, we're still learning things. So a tragedy of that nature, the chances of a rush to judgment are incredibly high. We know who the perpetuator is, and we know that he's no longer with us. We know that responsibilities lie in other directions. But for me, it's not. It's personal, and believe it or not, most of what I'm doing in my professional life is not personal. You know, I mentioned Mommy's dead or something like that, but in something like that, I think it would be a use, and I think that the people who have written about it are not maybe despicable, but certainly it's been a rush to judgment, and I think that the inaccuracies are incredibly high because there's so much that hasn't been resolved. So, nothing. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about your feelings about craft in terms of language poets versus more of a narrative construction of a poem?
That's hard. I tend to go for narratives. I mean, you probably have heard. Bicycles probably comes closer to me dealing emotionally than anything. And then I was doing so much with science in that because I study sea turtles. And I'm really so regretful of the war on drugs in Mexico. I'd be so damn glad when they stop it, because you can't enjoy going to Mexico because somebody might shoot you. I don't think anybody's going to shoot me, Nikki. I think that I get caught in a crossfire and I say, oh, damn, I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. But in the meantime, you see what I'm saying? I'm dead. And so you don't enjoy, going down. But the Mexican government has an incredible program that they're doing, helping the sea turtles. And of course, without boring anybody with it, the other thing that we need to do is we need to get plastic out of the ocean. Absolutely, because it is nothing sadder than you have a dolphin or something. We're strangling animals because they can't get it off. And so I'm a big fan. Washington, D.C. now is charging you for paper bags, and I'm glad about that. And I think that everybody should, because the only way that we get Americans' attention is to charge. I mean, that's Kroger's, that's everybody, because we need to get plastic out. It's bad. It's bad for the birds. Birds will run into it. It's bad for everything. It's bad for your trees. It's got to. It's got to stop. Now, you say, what are we doing between craft and narrative? I think it's all the same. It depends on what story you're trying to tell. Language does a lot of things. So I am a civil rights person. I'm 67, but I'm also a part of the hip-hop generation. I've always enjoyed it because you take a poem like Ego Tripping, that's going to sort of open it up. Or the title of the talk here tonight was Truth is on Its Way, which was actually an album where we blended gospel music with poetry. And that was the first time that had been done in that particular way. So it opened up a couple of doors. I think that we have to be particular in language. I am particular in my language. I'm not always polite in my language, but I am particular in it. And I think it's kind of important that poets say what they mean. If I was a politician, I'd probably say things a little differently, but I'm not. I'm not running for office, and my job is to describe it. So my description of Sarah Palin was accurate. And it was. You get sick of it. And so when you're in a position such as somebody like me is in, then you should do it, because the kids coming up can't do it, and we have obligation. My generation is a good generation. I really like us, and everybody in this room that's over 50, God bless us all, because we did a good job. And it's not our fault that things haven't worked out the way that we would like, and we are not bequeathing to the next generation a shabby situation. We did a good job, and we're expecting somebody else to pick up the mantle, because you can't just keep looking for us to do it, because we're getting old. But we stopped the war. We put food in the stomachs of the hungry. We sent kids to the hospital. Medicare is a good bill. And for somebody to act like, the Republicans, nobody else is going to get rid of Medicare, because it doesn't pay the people who are sick. It pays the people who are making them well. Hospitals are not going to allow Medicare. I wouldn't care. I hope the Tea Party wins. Close it down, and we'll see what happens. Because the people making the money are the surgeons, or the doctors, or the practitioners, and the hospitals. You and I are just trying to stay the hell alive. We're not making a bid. No, you can't go to the hospital and say, I'm going to get a shot because I need to make $50,000 this year. That's not what's happening. You're just trying to stay alive. And it makes me sick, all these games that people are playing. But I'm a 60s person. We were a very serious generation. So fooling around with us is not always the easiest thing. We expect it. No, and I'm not cynical. I was talking to the girls that drove me up here. I'm not cynical. So I think that I'm an idealist, actually. And I think that life should be good. And I think when I think of America, I don't think a lot of us as a general thing. I really don't. But I think that what we did that we have to live up to is the one thing that we want to all avoid. Every persuasion works to avoid it. Everybody on earth has done equality and fraternity. I don't care. You go to Russia, you go back to Greece, any place that you go, those are the two things. Every revolution, every time we change, people talk about equal and fraternal, right? But only America added, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's such an incredible thing that at some point, somebody, I'm sure Ben Franklin and Tom Jefferson had a lot to do with it, but at some point, because John Adams wouldn't have, that's the truth. But at some point, somebody said, people should be happy. It's not going to work out in 100 years or 200 years. Obviously, it probably won't work out in 3. But we finally codified that maybe human beings should be happy. And that's an incredible amount of faith. And so you have to ask yourself, what makes us happy? We are happiest when we discharge our responsibilities. So we need a job. We need some place to lay our heads that we can call our own. We need to feel free and comfortable in whatever it is that we love without worrying about what somebody else thinks about it. I am a big fan, of course, of gay marriage, because I don't see why somebody else has anything to do with who somebody wants to marry. Marriage itself is troublesome enough. Anybody crazy enough to do it ought to be able to do it with whoever they want to do it with. That's the truth. So, I don't know the difference between craft and narrative. I'm catching a cold. It's cold out here, and I'm a Southern. I didn't realize how far south I was. And I called home today, and it's like they were bitching because it's 68 degrees. I said, "Oh no, baby, I'm landing in Des Moines. It's 38 degrees." You know.
Are there any more questions?
Oh.
You mentioned in front of your talk, have you read Decoded?
Oh, I picked Decoded as one of my top 10 books of this year. I think Jay-Z, first of all, is a great kid. And talk about narrative. He tells a good story, always. And he also has a lot of style. And what I really want to know is how much he encouraged Beyonce to fire Matt. Matthew Knowles went to Fisk. He's a Fiskite. He's younger than I am, but he played on the basketball team. We called him Snake. And he's obviously a very good businessman, you know. But I think if I would be Beyonce and I'd be married to Jay-Z, I'd fire my father too. Because what does she need with him when she's got a husband that definitely knows the business? So I think there's a lot of good gossip to come out. I'm always being amazed at what you know, I look at like, was it Entertainment Tonight? And it's like, you know, that's not a story. You know, and in all fairness to the white people who are still here, and I'm not upset. Well, you know, I mean no disrespect here, but it really makes you mad that you have to read about a Britney Spears or whatever the hell it is they're going through, and a really important story like Beyonce firing Matt doesn't make the paper. No. And I want to know what happened to Serena's foot. How come that doesn't make, how come that's not news? And so, you know, it's hard to explain to white people that you as a black person are you're calling them prejudiced because we have to hear all the crappy news about the crappy white stars. Well, they're black stars that we're totally excited about hearing about, and I don't mind sharing. I'm not saying take the white folks off. I'm saying every now and then black folks do something interesting too, damn it. You know, I mean, gossip is gossip. Come on. Aren't you interested in some of these things? Didn't that surprise you when she fired Snake? And you're like, wow, I wonder what's going on. Nobody's even asking Jay-Z, you know, what did you have to do with that or something like, you know, these are stories, damn it. Well, anyway. I look at, which is my favorite show this year, honestly, God, The Good Wife. And I TiVo it, you know, and I'm unhappy when I miss it and things like that. And they have that judge who does that thing, in your opinion. Oh, she just cracks me up, in your opinion. It just cracks me up. That's a good show, though. That is a good, yeah, now you know Kalunda slept with her husband, you know, whoa. Oh, this is going to, wow, see? And she was crying. It's like, I cannot wait. It's a good show.
When you speak to audiences, just after your life and your experiences, what do you think, like, what is the most important message that you kind of try and bring? Or, like, is there one specific most important message?
I think the most important message that I'm trying to bring is you have to look at things for yourself. I hope I'm clear. I mean, I hope I've been clear. I start off, you know, bitching about the president, but it wasn't that. It was that I'm here and I should say something, because why would I miss an opportunity to at least share something? Nobody has to agree with me, and I'm a civil rights person. And so growing up at that era, I'm not having to be persuasive, because in another respect, if I may say it this way, I don't want something. I mean, I think it's lovely that I was invited here, and I think it's lovely that I earn a living. Don't misunderstand me. But I'm not trying to get something from you. So if I can put an idea out, you can take it as it comes, because I'm not, there's no understory here. Did I just make sense? And so if people like me don't say what we think, who else is going to? Because everything else, you're going to have to judge it on what are they trying to get out of it. On any given day, I probably cost myself money because I offend people. And, you know, to hell with that. And so, well, you know, you can't, but especially young people, you come to a college, you know, you just don't want to see what's happening happen. You just, I have no other, I know that war cannot be a jobs program. I know that we cannot saddle these youngsters here or at my school, Virginia Tech, or any place else with the kind of debt that we do. I know we can't get dentists and doctors if we're saddling them with $100,000 worth of debt. I know that we can't get thinkers if all of a sudden we're just packing them in and we're going to punish them every time they say something. So if the little old ladies don't pony up, who will? So that's what I'm trying to do. That's my job. I'm driving the bus, and my job is to see if I can park it.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Please join us for a reception in the back. And she'll be back signing books as well, right in the back here. Thanks again.
Thank you.